Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Giroux, reporting to you live from my home in Gatineau, Quebec, to yours to deliver what we like to call here at Global Vision some great news. We're currently on our 11th episode, showcasing what Canadians are doing from coast to coast to coast and to others around the globe during these challenging COVID times. And I would like to give a huge shout out to Matthew Cuesta, a fellow Torontonian, who is really sparking the conversation and honoring George Floyd through cycling 46 kilometers for 46 days at the unearthly hour of 4 a.m. We hope to have Matthew on our show soon. He's outreached to us, and we look forward to really sparking that dialogue with our viewers from coast to coast to coast. Last week, we were joined with Jean-Pierre Giroux, and we had a focus on the manufacturing sector and learning from him exactly the good, the bad, and the ugly of what was going on in Canada. And this week, I'd like to take it back to the East Coast, where we have Andrea Sarkic joining us live from St. John, New Brunswick, a government relationship expert, and here to share with us some of her tips and advice. Good afternoon, Andrea.
Hi, Amy. Hi, GV family. It's nice to see everyone. It's been a while.
Yes, well, thank you for joining with us. Andrea, in the spirit of our Some Great News, it'd be great if you could share with our viewers a little bit about how your work has been shaped differently in these COVID times.
That's a great question. I think for everyone fortunate enough to be able to work from home, which myself included, it's been a bit of a shift. I would say that I have colleagues that range from having newborns at home to taking care of loved ones that are older, or are single and living at home and working to adapt and figure things out. I think a challenge that we've overcome specific to the company that I work with, we are quite a large company. We employ, over 3,500 people sort of within the region. And our office space itself would have at the very least 1,000 people. So everyone is working from home. We're adapting with new technology. We're learning how to do that across the board, not only internally, but externally as well. I think another challenge, we specifically operate not only local to St. John and to New Brunswick, but we have a footprint within New England, in the United States, as well as in Ireland and a few other European countries. So, while adjusting and learning to physically work from home and how to make business as usual operate, there's also an added component of ensuring that operations are continuing in all of those regions, specifically when you look at what has occurred in Europe, the early effects of COVID, and even to local here. But we have some good news when you look at New Brunswick, specifically. I look across the street, I live uptown, it's vibrant. There are people outside walking, maintaining a social distance, but trying to get in an afternoon walk, whether it's with their dog or their children. You see businesses opening slowly. So patios are, full, again, keeping a social distance, but it's feeling the economy and the city come back to life a little bit and figure out how to do that in a new norm. And I think it's adaptation and adjusting to your circumstances is key for survival, not only your own work from home life, but also for those that, are doing that from a business perspective, et cetera.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Andrea. One thing I forgot to do when I was introducing you is, as we were reminiscing before the show started, this is actually we're celebrating 10 years with our Global Vision friendship and your very first mission with Global Vision to Southeast Asia and China, I believe. Yes. Could you maybe share with our viewers a little bit about what that experience and that beginning and lifeline, really, the last 10 years of being a GV grad, maybe impart some advice that you'd like to share with our viewers?
Yes, it's honestly frightening to hear you say 10 years. That's a decade. It's hard to believe. I think that, that imparts why when I said hello, it really is hello to family. It's not just calling an old friend, it's calling family. So that's nice. I also just noticed I have a new board up in my work from home office space that has some sticky notes, photos, 5 to Thrive, stay on track kind of stuff. And the bottom main picture is one we took on a domestic trade mission in Nunavut, or in Pangnirtung specifically, all those years ago where I coincidentally bumped into someone who was a photographer and teacher who actually went to the high school that I went to in a very small town. So just I keep that photo because it sort of reminds me to always think of adventure and pushing new horizons and boundaries. But specific to my time with GV, I started at what I thought was a pretty young age. You know, I was still learning my views on the world, trying to understand the world. Globalization was a very hot topic. It still is. It looks a little bit different today specifically, but I remember that first trip, you know, when we took that mission and you get on the ground and you have a mandate and you have a purpose for being there. You weren't wandering aimlessly. And I remember being filled with so much wonder because you're seeing new cultures, whether it's understanding new business practices, understanding new languages. But I remember being filled with purpose. And I don't know how many, you know, 18-year-olds can say that they necessarily have that. And so I know with Global Vision from an early time, there was understanding that there was always a boundary to be pushed, whether it was a literal border to go explore or to try out a new skill, to try, you know, a new practice, to learn something, find a new mentor, take on a new challenge. And, you know, I think specifically now in these times, and I take with the job I do, you know, being in government relations, relationships really matter. And I know from an early time, Terry and GV had coined the concept of a golden Rolodex. And what that really meant for me and what I've taken that to mean is that every relationship in your life should matter and it should be genuine and it should be something that's maintained. And, you know, perhaps it's something that you should continue to strive for, to build new bridges and build new relationships. And I think now, specifically in the times of COVID, that matters more than ever because, you know, before I'd be able to hop on a plane and go to a city where, you know, we wanted to strike up a new relationship in my line of work. And now that's not as simple. So having relationships to rely on from the past and then finding new ways to forge new relationships in the current context is really important. And you know, relationship building and maintaining, and it goes to show 10 years later, here we are, but that's one of the most important things I remember taking from Global Vision. And, you know, even aligned with being adaptable and understanding that not everything's going to go your way. Always have a plan B, a plan C. And now more than ever again, in the times of COVID, you know, those businesses that are looking to survive and that are pushing new boundaries, even governments that are surviving in this time are adapting. They're finding new ways forward. They're being innovative. They're thinking outside the box. And that's important.
Thank you, Andrea. That's so true. When I think of Global Vision, I think that's really one of our mottos, besides saying getting the experience that matters, it's really making relationships matter. Now joining me live from Calgary, Alberta, is our domestic and international sunshine journalist, Michael Vades. Michael, what do you got for us today?
Well, good morning, Amy. We have some other great news to report on today, but I'm going to start off in Massachusetts in the United States, where 103-year-old grandmother, Jenny Sterling, actually fought the coronavirus for 20 days and then celebrated her recovery by having nothing else than a Bud Light. Which just goes to show that no matter what you do, whatever challenges you face, there's always a good time for a cold one, and there's a good time to celebrate when we come over something as big as this. And secondly, we want to talk about something that's maybe out of this world per se. So SpaceX, the first a company founded by Tesla owner Elon Musk, actually just launched their very first space shuttle into outer space with a human capacity on board today. So it's the first private company ever to launch. It brought 2 international astronauts to the International Space Station. And from my perspective, I think these astronauts leaving Earth, they're doing a great job at social distancing. So good on to you guys, and you know, a great idea to see that even though the world may be stopping, you can still leave the world too. So excellent news today from the domestic and international front, and I'll throw it back to you, Amy.
Thanks, Mike. I always look forward to seeing what sunshine you're going to bring to some great news, and you always prove to bring a smile to my face. Now it's that time of our segment that we are bringing to you live from London, Ontario, our president and founder, and my #1 dad, Terry Clifford. Good afternoon, Terry.
Good afternoon, Amy, and our special guest today. And I'm just so happy to hear your comments about global vision, what you gained from your missions and your experiences, because you've certainly had a number of them with us over the 10-year period. But young people are interested, especially now with unemployment, youth unemployment reaching heights even greater than the early 80s. So they're wondering about careers and career futures. You have an interesting one, government relations. How has global vision been a part of you having that kind of position?
That's a great question, Terry. I think one of the benefits specifically of global vision for any youth that does get involved, whether you have had any exposure to sort of a political arena previously before coming to global vision or not, global vision opens certain doors for you and allows you to be in the room with folks that influence and folks that, you know, have a say in day-to-day matters, whether it's politics, whether they're leaders of, you know, important companies or local causes. And I recall some of the early days of global vision. You know, I had an interest in politics and I had sort of dabbled within it and began to work within it. But global vision managed not only, Terry, from, you know, your experience being a member of parliament and being involved in some really important discussions early on, like NAFTA, the original NAFTA, now that we've seen a second one,
Yeah.
and knowing that, you know, that's something you've done, and understanding that the youth of today, not just tomorrow, need to also be involved in some of those discussions, because there's interest there, and there's interest in ensuring that, you know, it's done right and it's done with a view on tomorrow. So global vision not only helped introduce me to more people, but it sparked an interest and also a confidence in me to know I can be involved in this process. I can have a seat at the table. I'm not just a youth, I'm not just a student, but I can be an equal in some of those discussions. And that was a really important thing, because it that confidence and that understanding and that allowance to be able to do those things inspires you to the next step. And I mean, I spent, I would say, almost a decade in Ottawa and then working in politics and working with ministers. And it all ends up sort of circling back to that relationship piece, where for years, my peers, you know, whether it was across the aisle working for the other party, or folks who had already started working in government relations before I did, or, you know, working for other ministers, etc., were actually a lot of other fellow GV grads. And it became a very small world where, you know, these inspired youth who ended up being, you know, young professionals working in the space that, frankly, I think global vision sparked for them in many ways.
And is that helpful to you in your job now? Anyone in government relations, are the connections to your peers and former peers in global vision, is that a continuation of your relationship, helpful continuation?
I would say it absolutely is. You know, not just long ago, I was working on a very special project, and that project, you know, was brought up by, it started with COVID, and it started with sort of a call to action by government and by the company I work with to say, you know, there's a problem, how can we pull together and address it? And there very quickly became an opportunity to retool and repurpose a portion of our manufacturing to produce hand sanitizer. And, you know, almost 10,000 liters immediately went to those in need locally, whether it was essential workers, frontline workers, etc. And near the end of that project and through the middle, you know, I'd started to realize as things ramped up, I actually connected with someone coincidentally in that moment, who was a great GV grad. And, you know, when we saw our emails cross, we picked up the phone and called each other, and for about 5 minutes before the rest of the phone call, had a really good chat about global vision, you know, chatted about you and Amy, and caught up and sort of said, look where we are now. So whether it happens, accidentally, where just by virtue of folks working in the same industry, or if it's on purpose, where I know there's folks I've met across Canada through Global Vision. Before I moved to Vancouver to take a job on the West Coast, I didn't have that many contacts. And prior to Global Vision, I would have never had contacts likely in British Columbia. And, I took that job with confidence and likely, I would say, excelled at that job because I had contacts already on the ground that I could pick up and build off of. And those were Global Vision contacts. And that's happened to me time and time again. When I moved to the East Coast from the West Coast, it was the same thing. I picked up the phone and, Adam Peabody, our resident Frederictonian, was already out here. I think probably my first month on the job, we connected at a mutual event and he helped open some doors for me. And, it becomes a very small world once you find the same motivated people through Global Vision that have built relationships and that have stood the test of time and really make it and continue forging forward. I think on top of that, Global Vision has also taught me if you don't already have the relationships, you learn through Global Vision how to pick up the phone, build that relationship, ask someone for a coffee. There are no free lunches. You take someone to lunch. That's something that I always remember you saying, and I couldn't, in the early beginning, I didn't necessarily understand it. Now that I work in government relations, I very much understand what that means. But at the end of the day, you also learn how to take no. When I was fundraising and working on early sponsorship to get on my first trade mission, you hear a lot of no's before you get a yes. But more often than not, that yes is the one that you really wanted or the one you really needed if you didn't know that's the one you wanted. And Global Vision teaches you some skills that you perhaps don't immediately understand until you need them and you're trying to thrive, not just survive in the workplace.
Thanks, Andrea, very much. That's really a great description of the value of Global Vision going forward in life. And it's a message that I want young Canadians to have and build on such as you did. And I want to remind you of one fond memory I have of you in 2010, 10 years ago, on a day much like it is today out here, very, very hot, very, very humid. Well, as a matter of fact, in Chongqing, it was 40 plus degrees and humid. And of course, millions of people, because the city has 33 million people in it. And you were right in the very center of the square with a couple of your colleagues with the Canada flag, having people show their friendship for Canada by signing the flag, which you later presented to the ambassador. So I always remember you doing that. And I just couldn't believe the crowd that you gathered around you. And I could see your poise and your confidence grow as the crowd grew. And that was a wonderful event for me. I just thought I'd share it with you now. So thanks for coming today. Amy, over to you.
Yes. Well, I'd like to thank Andrea and all of our reporters for joining in for some great news. We truly are trying to create a safe space for people to come together and get inspired and be motivated, and most importantly, to be that change that they want to see. So please stay tuned and join us at www.globalvision.ca for the next one. And until then, please everyone, stay safe and stay strong.